Jehovah's Witnesses claim they have the truth with a capital T. They even call the religion the truth as shorthand.
Isn't that how we feel about the truth? We love it when we accept the truth. Not all young ones raised in a believing household have stuck with the truth.
Witnesses will also be quick to remind you that Satan, like the Satan, is the father of the lie.
And he made himself into the father of the lie, Satan the devil.
So if Jehovah's Witnesses are the truth and lying was sired by the King Daddy demon himself, why do Jehovah's Witnesses lie about their beliefs so much? Now, I'm going to stop right here for any Jehovah's Witnesses who are watching, who are sure to be surprised and upset by this claim that I've made that witnesses lie about their beliefs. So as a quick example of what I'm talking about, one I won't belabor as I've discussed it in detail on the channel before, shunning. Do Jehovah's Witnesses practice shunning? The answer is obviously yes. If you look up the word shun on their website, there is an infamous video called Shun Unrepentant Wrongdoers, with which any JW watching this will be familiar. It's not called Shun Unrepentant Wrongdoers, maybe, if you feel like it. It's a command. Shun. Well, here's Watchtower lawyer David Nam at the Canadian Supreme Court.
And the congregation elders took the decision to disfellowship him. That word is used by Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witnesses don't use the word shun or shunning. They refer to it as disfellowship, disfellowshipping, disfellowshipped, because that really gives the sense of what's taking place within this particular religious community. Disfellowship literally means no further spiritual fellowship. The nature of the relationship then of a disfellowshipped person is not completely shunned. The disfellowshipped person is able to come into the congregation, to the congregation meetings. They're able to attend in the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses. They're able to sit wherever they like. They can sing the spiritual songs.
So David Nam just told a lie in a court of law.
Jehovah's Witnesses don't use the word shun or shunning.
Jehovah's Witnesses do shun, and they actually do call it shunning literally on their website right now. Here's another example. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, how are governing body members appointed? How does a person become a governing body member? Well, they're appointed by Jesus through Holy Spirit, and they have to be anointed. They have to know that they are one of the few, the 144,000 who are going to heaven. That is the correct answer, as you can see here from this quote on screen from the August 2020 Study Watchtower. It is true that through Christ, Jehovah has given gifts in men to his congregation. These gifts in men include governing body members. All these brothers are appointed by Holy Spirits to care for Jehovah's precious sheep and serve the interests of the congregation. Well, here's governing body member Jeffrey Jackson at the Australian Royal Commission in 2015.
I take it if the governing body is to be increased in size, that will be a decision of the governing body itself.
That is correct. But obviously we would get information from other fields.
And is it the case that the governing body then appoints new members of the governing body?
That is correct.
So Jeffy lied. The governing body teaches Jehovah's Witnesses that the members are anointed by Holy Spirit, chosen by Jesus. But in court, when giving sworn testimony on the record, he says they are elected democratically by existing members of the governing body. The existing members just vote on a new member. The men use a bureaucratic process to choose a new guy to bring into the club. This example's kind of interesting, though. Who is Jackson lying to in this instance, the court or to Jehovah's Witnesses? Maybe a bit of both? I guess if he had said, oh, Jesus appoints the new members, it might have resulted in some follow-up questions he might not have been able to easily answer and might make him sound a bit silly during this serious legal investigation, which uncovered that the religion had kept data on over 1,000 alleged child sex abusers within the religion and reported none of them to the police. Hey, wait, that's another lie.
Think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? Some examples of their strange teachings are that the faithful slave protects pedophiles.
This one is more lying by omission. Lett's accusation is that critics of the organization say witnesses are permissive towards CSA, or that the governing body protect PDF files. And they don't permit it. They do say that CSA is wrong. So that's admirable that they say that, but we might ask, if an organization has a practice of not reporting crimes to the police, isn't that functionally protecting the abuser. A semantic argument maybe, but according to Watchtower's own logic, the fact that Stephen Lett just made a somewhat misleading statement means that none of it should be trusted.
Remember, if it's just 10% correct, it is 100% misleading.
And now we've sort of reached inception. I'm accusing Watchtower of lying about other people accusing them of lying, but Watchtower would say that I'm lying about them, lying about me. I show all this just to give some quick examples of leadership within Jehovah's Witnesses being dishonest or lying, so any peeping and or doubting Toms know exactly what I'm talking about. But this isn't a video about why leaders of high-control religions lie about their beliefs. The answer to that is obvious. They're narcissists who want to hang on to their power, so they'll say anything to keep their fragile belief system and ego intact. No, this is a video about regular old Jehovah's Witnesses, the rank and file, whatever that means. Normies, if you will, because not only do Jehovah's Witnesses in my comments lie a lot, my own Jehovah's Witness parents lied a lot. They lied to my face and to each other's faces, as we will talk about later in the video. But I don't think they thought they were lying in the way that we understand that term, because when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I lied to so many people's faces and didn't even really realize it until after I left. So I should probably explain what I'm talking about. If Jehovah's Witnesses have a favorite book, that would be the Bible, obviously. But if they have two favorite books, I'd say the second would be the dictionary.
Now, according to a dictionary,
The dictionary says,
one dictionary definition for association is...
Webster's dictionary says that it is...
And Webster's dictionary did capture that fact very nicely. Here's what it says.
Webster's dictionary defines...
Stop! Webster's dictionary defines... That's the Jim Belushi of speech openings. It accomplishes nothing, but everyone keeps using it and nobody understands why.
But when it comes to defining the word lie or lying, Watchtower suddenly needs to use their own dictionary. Insight on the Scriptures, the primary reference work for Watchtower doctrine, defines lying in a very clever way. The opposite of truth, lying generally involves saying something false to a person who is entitled to know the truth, and doing so with the intent to deceive or injure him or another person. Anyone who is entitled to know the truth. What a devious way to describe deviousness. Watchtower's fake definition with a loophole in it is pretty transparent. Sometimes it is okay to lie to someone if that person doesn't deserve to know the truth, if they're not entitled to it. Who might that be? Government officials trying to hold Watchtower legally responsible for covering up crimes? Perhaps, as a for instance, but most Jehovah's Witnesses never have to put on an embarrassing robe and say lies to Canadians. They just lie to people in the ministry, or on Quora, or in my comments section, or to themselves. Yeah, this is going to be a deep, smart video for adults. If you're an ex-witness watching this, there's a term I haven't used yet that you've probably been waiting for. Theocratic warfare. Also, I probably put it in the title, so you may have been waiting for it for that reason. Theocratic warfare is sometimes said, by me on this channel, to be the fair game doctrine of Jehovah's Witnesses. Scientologists have this practice called fair game, which essentially means that anyone deemed to be a suppressive person or enemy of the church is fair game for Scientologists to lie about. Scientologists are particularly extreme in this regard. They will start websites accusing ex-members of horrible crimes, they'll stalk people, try and spread lies to ex-members' employers to get them fired. Witnesses don't do that, but they do have a similar principle. The phrase comes from the May 1st, 1957 Watchtower, from an article entitled Use Theocratic War Strategy. Another command, like shun. Use this. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It says, so, in time of spiritual warfare, it is proper to misdirect the enemy by hiding the truth. It is done unselfishly. It does not harm anyone. On the contrary, it does much good. Today, God's servants are engaged in a warfare, a spiritual theocratic warfare, a warfare ordered by God against wicked spirit forces and against false teaching. God's servants are sent forth as sheep among wolves, and therefore need to exercise the extreme caution of serpents so as to protect properly the interests of God's kingdom committed to them. At all times, they must be very careful not to divulge any information to the enemy that he could use to hamper the preaching work. Theocratic warfare is very black and white. Thing is, this is also a pretty old quote. And if you look up theocratic warfare as a phrase in the organization's online database, It shows up dozens of times, and often in a context that has nothing to do with lying or withholding information. I mention this only because sometimes as ex-members, we form our own shorthand, and we'll just say this phrase, theocratic warfare, as if it's an official doctrine all Jehovah's Witnesses know about, but I had never heard this phrase used in this way until I started looking at sites like jwfacts.com. That is a nitpick, though, because while I might not have known to use this term specifically, I did know this concept. Usually, it was talked about in the context of the Great Tribulation, a time when witnesses are targeted by the government before Armageddon, because that's the thing we believed.
The book of Ezekiel foretells that the nations will attack Jehovah's people, coming like a vast army and like clouds covering the land.
What if we are hiding our fellow witnesses under the floorboards? Do we have to be so honest that we'd have to give them up if the Fourth Reich asks us where we're hiding them? And I was told, no, you can withhold information or bend the things that are correct in certain circumstances. If someone doesn't deserve to know the truth, or isn't entitled to know it. And the biblical example we be given is Rahab, the hottest sex worker in Jericho. I don't remember the Bible in clear detail, but there's these two good guys, God guys, who need to hide from the bad guys. So they hide in a prostitute's castle. I don't know, the Bible story book made it look like she lived in a castle or something. So anyway, the bad guys come to the sex castle, and they're like, where are those two guys who love Jehovah so much? And Rahab, the hottest prostitute, is like, not here, that's for sure. So they move on, like the lazy stormtroopers in A New Hope. Watchtower talks about this story a lot, a weird amount, especially because they often pitch it as a children's story, but the JW publication Imitate Their Faith describes the Rahab deception in this way. Using simple strategy, she had misdirected murderous men who had no rights to the truth, and she had saved innocent servants of Jehovah. The lesson: lying is okay if it is in service of furthering Jehovah's purpose. And while I can only speak for my own experience, I only ever thought of this lying for Jehovah concept in the context of Armageddon, or persecution, or just hiding with a prostitute, not having sex or anything. They were men of God. Thinking back, I wonder if this embedded itself into my subconscious a little bit. I remember being asked by classmates about disfellowshipping back when I was like in middle school and high school and stuff, and I would just instinctively say, no, we don't shun people. Disfellowshipping just means we don't worship with them. This was a lie. I would instinctively lie, and that's weird because I had multiple disfellowship family members at the time, and I did shun them. Not like by personal choice, the whole witness family shunned them. Those of us in the truth shunned our family members who were out of the truth, and yet still, when asked if I did those things I did, my instinct was to say the opposite of the truth. I never remember feeling guilty about this, but I do remember noticing it. My thinking was, this person asking me about disfellowshipping, they're a worldly person. They wouldn't get it. If I explained how disfellowshipping works to a worldly person, they would think it sounds weird and culty. And that's because they don't have a full understanding of the Bible like we do. If they were a witness, they would get it. And they won't become a witness if they think we're weird, so I'll tell them a more appealing version of disfellowshipping, also known as a lie. Nobody ever explicitly told me to do this. My parents never sat me down and told me to water down our unappealing doctrines to worldly people so as not to freak them out, but this was learned behavior. I suppose I learned it from my parents, seeing them do this in the ministry, but we definitely all learned it from the publications, the videos, and articles on the website. Let's look at my favorite example of this. It's the thing that Jehovah's Witnesses most often accuse me of lying about on my channel. Here's a basic question about Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs. Do witnesses think they will be the only group saved at Armageddon? If you had asked me as a witness, I would have said no, because I didn't believe that personally. And I didn't think, or maybe didn't want to believe, that my religion taught that. Jehovah and Jesus read hearts, so they'll save people who have a good heart, not just people who have a jw.org lapel pin. And I'm not alone. This JW commenter on Quora answered the question this way. Jehovah Witnesses never said that. There will be resurrection of both the righteous and unrighteous, or those not given a chance to learn about Jehovah. Only Jehovah and Jesus can read hearts. This is why no Jehovah Witness would make such a statement. However, not everyone will get a second chance. But here's the thing. This is a lie. The publications are unambiguous. They say it outright. Only Jehovah's Witnesses have any hope of survival. Which means hashtag not all Jehovah's Witnesses too, right? Because even some Jehovah's Witnesses will be revealed to have a wicked heart, or they never confessed to watching porn when they were 12. So a church topples right on top of their face during the Battle of Jaw's army. And yet, I did not believe this as a Jehovah's Witness. I did not believe that only me and my special religion would survive. And so when people asked me this, I said something that still technically wasn't true. I said, we do not believe that. See, I liked to use the frequently asked questions articles on jw.org to prepare my field service presentations, and here's what the FAQ article for this question says. It says, no. Many millions who have lived in centuries past and who weren't Jehovah's Witnesses will have an opportunity for salvation. The Bible explains that in God's promised new world, there is going to be a resurrection of both the righteous and the unrighteous. Additionally, many now living may yet begin to serve God, and they too will gain salvation. In any case, it's not our job to judge who will or won't be saved. That assignment rests squarely in Jesus' hands. This is sneaky. I have a whole rebuttal to this on my website, jwfaq.org, and I talked about it at length on a stream recently, which I'll link in the description, so I will not belabor the point. But you can see that the framing of the question is devious, and then Watchtower proceeds to answer a sort of different question. The words don't really make any sense, to put it inelegantly, but the message to witnesses is clear. This is the feeling prospective members should get. When you're preaching to people and they ask this question, answer it in such a way that avoids the actual answer, but suggests that we don't think that during Armageddon, God is going to kill 8 billion people minus 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses. This disparity in what the website says versus what the doctrines actually teach was reaffirmed in a recent video dramatization with fictional JW character Jade studying with a prospective convert.
So God is love, but he's going to kill billions. How's that work?
Well, it'll make sense later. But for now, let's just focus on what I was talking about earlier.
See, instead of answering the question, Jade says, it'll make sense later. This video is fascinating because it's called Develop the Art of Teaching. And what we're seeing here where Jade deflects is technically the bad example. It's Jade not necessarily being good at teaching. However, there is no good example of how to answer this question in the video. Tellingly, even though this is Jade being bad at teaching, it is not something that Jehovah's Witnesses believe, because you will notice if you watch the full video, there's never a moment where Jade has to correct this or answer the question correctly. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. When I was still a member, losing my faith, and first saw J.W. Fax's article on whether only Jehovah's Witnesses will survive Armageddon, it really blew my mind. It's like I had never registered what my beliefs meant. I had never thought about billions of humans being murdered on Doomsday. I had never thought of how narcissistic and extreme that is, because I had only ever heard the question through Watchtower's framing, which meant I had only heard the answer through Watchtower's framing. And they frame the answer differently depending on the context. And I am going to belabor this point because I find cognitive dissonance really fascinating and scary. So let's do an autopsy to see what went wrong here. In my Jehovah's Witness brain, I believed the following things. You need to be a Jehovah's Witness to live a fulfilling life. If I got disfellowshipped and Armageddon came, I would be destroyed and not resurrected. Therefore, I and all Jehovah's Witnesses need to preach about God's kingdom because Armageddon is coming, the Armageddon that I am afraid of dying in. I knew that I believed all these things. But I also, at the same time, believed Jehovah's Witnesses are not the only group who's going to survive Armageddon. These are obviously contradictory, but I believed it all at the same time. That's what cognitive dissonance is. And to answer the video's central question, I believe this is why Jehovah's Witnesses will flat out lie about their beliefs to help the group's image. It's because they believe the lie they're telling and the actual doctrine at the same time. When I was leaving the group, I tested this on my parents. I asked this question: do Jehovah's Witnesses teach that we're the only group who's going to be saved? And then they said no. And then I showed them the quotes that I just showed you in this video. And do you know what they said? I actually don't remember, but it clearly didn't bother them too much because they're still witnesses, which means I'm still shunned. The thing witnesses don't do, apparently, my parents are not shunning me based on differences that we do not have. What? I believe these lies that members tell are subtly but meaningfully different than the lies Watchtower's lawyers, our governing body members, tell in court. First of all, members lack critical information. They are kept in an information silo. They are made to be terrified of any negative reporting, any social media post, any information that so much as references Jehovah's Witnesses if it doesn't come from inside the group. Like if you're a non-JW watching this and a witness knocks on your door, and you ask that witness, you ask them about the group's CSA problem, and the witness says, "What problem?" But they're not lying, probably. They really probably don't know about it because they're not allowed to know about it. They've been manipulated with fear to avoid ever double-checking what the leadership says. But when Stephen Letts says it, he and all of his governing friendies have been named as defendants in CSA litigation in New York. And I know you might be thinking, wow, he missed a really obvious opportunity to say governing buddies. Well, canonically, governing buddies are the governing body helpers. There's lore on this channel. Real ones know. Anyway, here's a comment I got from someone who denied that the religion had any rules about higher education. That's another example of a lie. They do have rules about higher education, but I did a whole video about this, which you can see on Patreon or by becoming a channel member. Yes, it's the end of the video because I talked about everything I wanted to talk about, and I tricked you into listening to a plug. Like and subscribe, suckers. Sorry, I didn't know how to end this video.